Hi everybody, it's Colleen again. Thank you for coming back to the studio today. We're going to have a nice, quiet chat and draw. I've got this piece I'm working on for one of my upcoming books. I can't tell you what it is, but I think it's safe to go ahead and work on it with you guys here because I don't think this page gives very much away. And even though this chat and draw is going to last for at least an hour, I sincerely doubt it's going to get along far enough for me to spill any story secrets, but you can sit here and watch me work and we can talk together and have some fun on this cold December day. We've had tons of snow this week and I haven't gone anywhere in days and days and days, but it's been good for my work. I've been working steadily and turning things in and actually made up a little time on my schedule. I'm running months behind. As many of you know, I've had some health issues that have been going on for a really long time, but I'm learning to manage them better. And I'm happy to say I'm actually starting to make up some of this lost time. I lost about 4 months of work last year, and it will be months before I'm back on schedule, but at the very least, I'm not as far behind schedule as I was before, so yay! My chat and draws are just me talking and answering your questions, which I love to do, so thanks to the support of all of my patrons, and I am going to go ahead and pull out a question to answer right now. This is from Journeyman Studios, a supporter of my Patreon, and he says, "Hello Colleen, we're big fans of yours. Could you discuss your influences, heroes, and the good people publishers you've met in the industry? Thanks, and yes, please mention us by name. We're Journeyman Studios, a couple of guys in their 40s trying to create comics and RPGs. This is our Instagram. They're at Instagram.com/journeyman1029. And there's occasional adult material in that link, so be forewarned, but I'm not big into censoring people, so check it out. And thanks for your question, Journeyman Studios. Nothing makes me happier than getting to talk about my favorite artists. And I thought I'd talk today about one of my earliest influences, and that's Tasha Tudor, who illustrated my favorite book when I was a little girl, which is Frances Hodgson Burnett's The Secret Garden. I absolutely loved this book when I was a kid. It was a huge influence on me. It was a big influence on my entire life, really. And Tasha Tudor was the illustrator. She was the first illustrator I became aware of that I really liked and wanted to emulate. A lot of the illustrators doing children's books back then were doing highly stylized work with lots of flat colors, and the stuff looked very, I don't know, Mary Blair, Disney-esque, with big flat colors and very stylized figure work and whatnot. But Tasha Tudor was doing really lovely old school children's illustration. I'm sure she must have been heavily influenced by people like Beatrix Potter. Tasha wasn't as technically proficient as Potter, I'm sure, but she did have a lovely, sweet, naive quality to her art, which I thought was very appealing and appropriate to books like The Secret Garden and A Little Princess, which was also written by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Really important books to me when I was a little girl. They influenced my way of thinking about illustration and my tastes in reading material and my art. So they were very important to me growing up. And Tasha Tudor is a very interesting person, a very unusual woman. I don't know how much you know about her. I guess we'll have a little talk about that today. But Tasha was a highly eccentric woman who decided that she was the reincarnation of a woman from the 1830s. So she wanted to live the lifestyle of a sea captain's wife in Ipswich. That was what she wanted from her life, and she went to great lengths to make that happen. She lived in a remote farm in Vermont and decided to eschew many of the modern conveniences. It's often reported that she lived entirely off the grid, had no modern conveniences, and so on. And that's not actually true. It is true that when she first moved out to the country, she didn't have a lot of these things. But over the years, they were added to the farm. I read a statement from one of her kids that she actually got electricity as early as 1955, and one of her videos states that she had a freezer, and in other interviews I've read that she also had a small room 8 feet by 8 feet in which she kept the modern stove and the modern fridge. She also spoke of keeping dead animals in the freezer so that she could pose them and use for reference and then return to the freezer later. I thought that was hilarious. But her work was very sweet and a bit naive and tended toward naturalism, even though it was quite childlike in its sensibilities. It was just lovely work, very pleasant to look at, very kind at its core. I've always enjoyed looking at her illustrations. I don't think she had the technical proficiency, again, of someone like a Beatrix Potter, who was far more of an influence on my work in the main than Tasha Tudor was. But Tasha Tudor was my first big influence, and her way of life and way of thinking became a major focus of my own life over the years. Her desire to live in the country, live a quiet life, influenced my decisions to move to the country for better or for ill. Not entirely helpful if you're trying to be an illustrator in this modern world, let me tell you. But I did admire her model of living in the country and living a simple life. And for a while there, I gave it a good go. I guess for the better part of 15 years, I tried growing my own food, and I even thought of going off the grid at one point, but eventually decided that was not practical. And of course, Tasha didn't do it either. Like I said, a lot of people erroneously assumed that she did live entirely as if it was 1830. Many stories are written about how she wove her own cloth and spun her own cloth and dyed her own cloth and did everything as if it was 1830. That's not entirely true, but quite a lot of it is true. She did have a lot of craft and old world skills and pursued them avidly. I was a big enough fan of hers that in later years I would buy seeds from her garden, and I have clothing that was made by her family. I would wear my little Tasha Tudor aprons and pinafores and that sort of thing. It's kind of funny. But Tasha was not only interesting for her own sake, she was from a very, very interesting family and a very influential family. Her father was Starling Burgess, and he was a famous inventor. He was far more influential in the world than Tasha was. He worked with R. Buckminster Fuller. He helped invent the Dymaxion car with Buckminster Fuller. He was a famous yacht designer, a famous engineer, and when he was only 19, he patented a design for a machine gun, which is just extraordinary. He was a very unusual man, and when I was researching Tasha Tudor over the years, I became even more interested in her family over time than I was in her alone, because she was such an unusual and eccentric person and came from such a important Boston family that did incredible things over the generations. They were quite wealthy. In fact, her great-grandfather was Frederick Tudor, and he was known as the Ice King back in the 1800s. He had a huge ice shipping business that reached all the way to India, and he was enormously wealthy at one time. The Tudor family gained and lost money on a fairly regular basis, and Starling Tudor, though a celebrated inventor, was not known for his business acumen, and he tended to make some bad decisions. But on her mother's side, Tasha Tudor's grandfather, Frederick Tudor, was a very canny businessman, very sharp, and extremely successful. And Tasha's family was one of the Boston Brahmins, Brahmin being a reference to the upper caste, the very, very highfalutin Boston families who exerted a great deal of influence and had a great deal of wealth. By the time Tasha was born, the family was not quite so wealthy, but they were expected to live a certain way and behave a certain way. And from everything I've read, she was rather traumatized by her parents' divorce. Her mother was a well-known portrait artist named Rosamond Tudor. Tudor, of course, is her maiden name. And her highly gifted and eccentric father was named Starling Burgess, and that's actually Tasha Tudor's name. She was born Starling Burgess. His full name was actually William Starling Burgess, but Tasha was actually named Starling Burgess, and she changed her name legally in later years. But I think the smoke I'm drawing on this candle is maybe too thick. I think it's probably too ponderous. I don't really like that very much. I might start this whole page over just to irritate everybody. It's hard for me to concentrate and have these discussions at the same time. I tend to be very focused when I'm working. But anyway, what I really like is for somebody to write a good book about the generations of the Tudor family. You can't find anything about Rosamond Tudor. I find that very irritating. You can find quite a lot about Tasha's father, but about her mother, not so much. And like I said, that's irritating because she was a successful artist in her own right, and there's just not very much about her out there. When you go searching for images of her art, again, it's hard to find information. I find that really, really annoying. But there is a book about her father, and let's see if I can remember the name of it. Maybe I have it written down. No Ordinary Being. And you can find it on Amazon and eBay for outrageous expensive prices, but don't pay those, because if you go to the Whaling Museum, you can find the book available at its original price, and it's not cheap at that, but at least you're not paying $300, $400, $500 from secondary sellers. The Whaling Museum has the book, and you can go get it there. I just figured out how I'm going to fix this. I was going to do that anyway, but now I'll really do it. I'm going to use a lot of black over on this side of the picture. Anyway, so I might as well just start blacking that out. This just looks really lumping to me. I don't like it. Let me take some of this out. Anyway, I think you'll be absolutely fascinated by Starling Burgess. That looks better. Good. Okay. In fact, the Air and Space magazine did an article about him. I think they entitled it something like, "This is the most important aviator you've never heard of," or something along those lines. I can't remember the exact title, but just look up William Starling Burgess. You'll find information about him. He's a fascinating individual, and what I would really like, as I mentioned before, is a book about the whole family. It strikes me as very interesting and strange that a young lady from a family that was so progressive. I mean, her mother was a early feminist, and she was a pilot, and this incredibly independent, unique woman, but her daughter rejected a lot of that and became this woman who wanted to live as if it were 100 years in the past. There's a lot going on there. Everybody makes their choices and they do what they want. But that is a very unusual and interesting choice. And Victoria magazine over the years made quite a lot of, okay, that does look better, made quite a lot of doing stories about Tasha Tudor's lifestyle, and there are a couple of videos. One of them's called Take Peace and the other is called Take Joy. I have both of those. Quite lovely and pleasant to watch. They're not very in-depth, and they're, of course, rather hagiographic, as you would expect that. Nobody expects people to make critical videos of someone they admire and love. In the videos, they state that she's one of the most prolific illustrators of all time. I would strongly suggest that that's a bit of an exaggeration. I don't know, maybe it's just me as a cartoonist, because we're all workhorses, and only a dozen or so books over a lifetime doesn't seem like very much, but I think she was probably not that prolific in the main. She did do a number of greeting cards and so on, but her book output was fairly modest, I'd say. But they were award winners, and they stayed in print for many, many years. You can get most of her books now, like Pumpkin Moonshine and A is for Annabelle and that sort of thing. I think her style of work is not so much in fashion anymore, but there is a cottage industry surrounding her work and her life, and her fans are very devoted. Obviously, I used to be a member of the Tasha Tudor Society. And like I said, I'd hoped to go off the grid and lead a quiet life working in my garden and drawing pictures. But even so, Tasha Tudor didn't live that life quite as much as one might think. She had a truck, and she would get people to help her plow her fields and use modern conveniences when she really needed them. And so the pictures of things are not quite as romantic as the reality, but that's the way it is. It's not that big a deal, and it looks like she lived her life exactly the way she wanted to, which is wonderful. I mean, most people never get to do that. That's delightful, and there are many books about her lifestyle and her accomplishments. Like I said, it's an entire cottage industry surrounding her. I don't think you'll really see that much influence in my work today from having admired Tasha Tudor as a girl. In fact, I don't think you'll really see any at all. In some of my illustrations when I was a little girl, you can see it, but not really very much going on there now. The minute I discovered comic books, I pretty much lost interest in that art style, and eventually I discovered Beatrix Potter, who I think is the more technically proficient artist and more influential. I'm not saying that to knock on Tasha Tudor in the least at all. I'm just saying that I came to admire Beatrix Potter more, and I also came to, while we're talking about artists we love, might as well talk about Beatrix Potter. I'm sure she must have been a huge influence on Tasha Tudor. And she was born, I think Tasha Tudor was born in 1915, I think, and Beatrix Potter, I think, was born in 1866. I could be wrong, but I think that's close. And Potter's anthropomorphic animals and naturalistic watercolors were hugely popular. They still are. And not only that, she was an extraordinary mind. She was a conservationist, and she was interested in agriculture, not just as a lifestyle choice, but as a committed worker. She really believed in what she was doing, and she helped revive and enhance sheep farming in the UK. Maybe revive isn't the right word, but she did help to preserve a lot of the Lake District. She acquired a great deal of wealth in her lifetime and independence, because her books helped to make her independent. And she donated many thousands of acres of her land to the National Trust in the UK, which ensured the preservation of the Lake District. Now that is something I truly admire. That has been an odd pet dream of mine for many years, to have enough land to commit it to conservation. We've all got our goals. That's one of mine. I always wanted a bird sanctuary, but I don't even know if I'm going to stay in the country forever. Who knows? But Beatrix Potter also had a very scientific mind as a young woman. She studied flora and fauna, did a number of scientific illustrations as a young woman. If you can hear some rattling about in here, that's because a squirrel is at my window going about his business. They do like to come to the window in the studio and cause mischief. Your little farts. I like these guys. I come up here every day and visit my little office, and we have a lovely time together. They get all the things they want to eat, and I get to watch silly squirrels. I really ought to do a book about animals someday. It would probably come off looking a lot like Beatrix Potter, wouldn't it? I do like Beatrix Potter. So those were two of my earliest influences, and I can't really say that Tasha Tudor has lasted with my art at all. I don't think we have any similar ground there, but if I were to go through some of my old illustrations and pull them out, you can really see it, especially my flower illustrations. I used to do lots of pictures of plants, and they looked quite a lot like Tasha Tudor. And somewhere between Tasha Tudor and Beatrix Potter, I got it in my head that I had to live in the country and have a little farm, which I have just recently abandoned my efforts there. After, I don't know how long I've been out here, but I'm afraid autoimmune disease has kicked me in the butt, and the healthiest lifestyle in the world will not avail you much if you are trying to run a farm. A farm does not wait for you. If you are not Johnny on the spot with it, it's going to be completely out of control in a matter of months. And I've got energy for two things these days: writing and drawing. I don't even oops, I just made a mistake. Oh well, I'll fix that. I don't even have enough energy to do a lot of my chores. I'm afraid somebody does many of my household chores for me, though I am determined to bake cookies today. But most of my energy has to go toward art making. I have been having the hardest time trying to get back to regular work for months and months and months and months. And I just assumed that once I got diagnosed and medicated, I'd just go back to normal. That's not how that works. You've got to make radical lifestyle changes. One of my radical lifestyle changes has been cutting out a lot of things that I'm just not capable of doing at this time, and one of them has been my little farm. I held on to that for much longer than I should have, and it became a real sunk cost fallacy, and I didn't realize that working too hard trying to do physical labor when I really wasn't able to do it was helping to make me sicker, and it was continually making me fall behind schedule. I just thought, healthy lifestyle, you get healthier. That's not how it works, and that's not how it worked for me. So that was a big disappointment. So out goes my farm. Will I stay out here in the country forever? I don't even know. I was actually thinking of moving back to the city not too long ago. I don't know if I'll do that either. You never know. I'm open to anything. So anyway, that's today's chat and draw. You got to see me draw a little bit of this. I don't really like how this is going. I will probably start over from scratch. I'm not entirely happy with this drapery or how I'd conceived of these candles, so I might just start this over again. It's a little wonky for me to do this kind of work while I'm talking. Normally what I would do, and I will show you exactly what I would do if this were me trying not to perform for an audience, is I would get to a point I wasn't sure of, and then I would just start sketching that in. I'm trying to keep you entertained here at the same time, and that's not working out for me. So maybe next time we do a chat and draw, I'll do a sketch or something, but I'm not happy with this. I'm going to print this out, and well, I don't think I need to print this out. I'm going to light box this part that I've got done and start it over. The rest of this is very, very light. I don't think I'm going to need to preserve any of that. But anyway, that's our chat and draw for the day. Thanks to Journeyman Studios for your nice question. I really appreciate you supporting my Patreon and popping in today. I hope you'll check out the work of Tasha Tudor and check out her website and do some further reading on your own, especially about Starling Burgess. Absolutely fascinating, brilliant man, brilliant inventor, brilliant engineer. You really must read more about him. He's a hidden gem. And again, thank you for supporting my Patreon. I'm going to get back to work where I can concentrate a little bit better while trying not to perform. And have a great week. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.